Welcome to Search for Signs. My name is Gary Willing. If after listening to this video, this information interests you, please feel free to press the like and subscribe button and the bell for notifications. If you have any questions about Maitreya or the Masters of Wisdom, simply post your question as a comment, or you can email me directly at searchforsigns@mail.com. Well, good day to you. It is August the 26th, 2020, and I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are. Now, I do have 3 comments to cover in this video, and of course I want to read one of Benjamin Creme's Masters articles, so hopefully you'll wait to the end to hear that, because I think it's a wonderful commentary on what we're about to see in the world today. So let's get on into it. The first comment comes from Abdullah from Iraq. All right, 10 days later, the date of the death of natural resources, or the death of the Earth's resources, according to the prophecy of the Mayan civilization, according to the Coptic Orthodox calendar, used in Ethiopia and called the Ethiopian calendar. Now, he wrote that 5 days ago, so I guess if this is true, we only have 5 days left. Now, if I'm wrong and the world is going to end this week, I do want the check that I write the last bill collector that I'm writing a check to, I want that check to bounce. No, I don't. To be honest, I really don't think that's going to happen. But what most people fail to realize, a couple things about this comment. What most people fail to realize is, one, every planet throughout cosmos is ensouled with a great entity called a logos. Now, this massive diva that ensouls a planet goes through 7 rounds in order to become a perfected logi. We, on this planet, or our planet, is halfway through it's actually in the middle of the 4th round. So the 7 rounds that it has to go through take millions and millions and millions and millions of years per round. So we still got a long way to go, but we've come a long way, so to speak. But if you were to compare us to, let's say, the planet Venus, which is in the middle of their last round, that is how we are going to be in the future. Now, if you go to Venus, of course, you wouldn't see anything because we don't have etheric vision. We would just see a bunch of, rocks and gas and wouldn't be able to breathe or whatever like this. But if we could get onto the etheric plane, we would actually see a civilization that's nearly perfected. If we could interact with someone from Venus, we would be astounded at their level of consciousness, because they're pretty much all like, the masters themselves, right? But that civilization is perfected. So, but that's how we're going to be, eons from now. Now, there's also planets that are less evolved than our planet, but not as many as there are more evolved than our planet. So our planet's kind of playing catch up in a lot of ways, because we made some serious mistakes over the past, or we would be probably pretty right up there with some of the other planets. But in the future, our role will be very similar to Venus's when it comes to helping aid those younger brothers and sisters on those other planets, so to speak. Now, in terms of the Earth's resources, it's really, the Earth is in peril for sure. And because of commercialization, of course, our resources are being used up at an alarming rate. Now, according to Benjamin Creme's master, of course, and this is common sense, right? But the resources of the world are finite, but with good husbandry, they can last indefinitely, I think is kind of what he said. But it's not so much right now, the problem is not so much right now about the Earth's resources being used up, as it is the pollution that we're creating because of the same system of commercialization. Before I get into the pollution aspect of it, let's look at the resources, because this has to do quite a bit with the injustice in the world, because you look at the resources, right? They're not evenly distributed all throughout the world. Some areas of the world have better resources than others, for instance, right? It is looked upon today as acceptable, let me put it like that if a country or a corporation or a conglomeration of corporations or an individual even is in control of that property, whatever resources are coming from that property, whether it's a country or a plot of land, right, is theirs and theirs to profit from at the expense of others, right? I mean, that's pretty much the accepted way of capitalism of today. Now, In the future, and I want to use this as an analogy, okay, it will be as foreign for the people of the future to think of resources as their own and not for the benefit of everyone. Imagine the audacity of someone looking at the sun, which the sun provides free light and heat for all of us to live, right? If it wasn't for the sun, all of us would basically perish from this planet, right? Imagine if somebody had the ambition to privatize the sun and therefore charge a fee for all of us to gain access to the beneficent energy of the sun, right? Wouldn't that be kind of crazy, right? Well, that's in the future. We will look back at this time and then the past as, why would you do that? It doesn't belong to you. The moon doesn't belong to, and there are people who are trying to privatize and own the moon, but yet the moon's just there, right? It's the same principle, right? So that's what's creating the injustice in the world. So that is a problem, what you're talking about, right? But and it's more of the injustice of hoarding those resources than the actual using up of the resources at this moment in time. Now, getting to the pollution aspect, right? Well, the big topic about the environment, of course, is global warming. And then, of course, there are people who politicize that. They deny science. They deny the effects that they see with their own eyes because the Earth is getting warmer, right? They deny all that to justify their own political, beliefs, right? But even then, Maitreya would say that as bad as global warming is, it's not the biggest problem in the world. The biggest problem is the pollution coming from the nuclear reactors around the world, from storing of the nuclear, waste, from having nuclear weapons that are sitting there that are creating radiation. Now, if you believe the science of today, you would say, well, of course, that's safe, right? Well, I mean, I have a Geiger counter. I could put it right up to the side of a nuclear silo or whatever, or a storage facility, and there's nothing being measured on there. Well, the masters will tell you that that Geiger counter is not measuring all the radiation. It's only measuring up to the level of gas. It can measure radiation on the physical, the liquid, and the gaseous states, but there are 4 levels of physicality above gas. It's called the etheric, which leads me back to what I was talking about the Venusians. They're living on one or other of those etheric planes. So that's why you can't see them if you go there. They have to lower their vibration in order for us to be able to see their ships and so forth. So, but that's where the problem is. So the problem of radiation can, of course, affect somebody physically, but it's affecting all of us right now, without exception, etherically. And all our health of our physical bodies is coming from our etheric body, not even from our physical body. So it's killing humanity off. And according to the masters, pollution is the number 1 killer out there. So Maitreya is going to address this problem, of course, as soon as he is out known for who he is, or maybe even before then. He will start to address the need to shut down nuclear reactors, to convince our world leaders to do it because of the danger of it, because it is unstable even, and there's been instances like Chernobyl and like what happened in Japan, where we think we have that tiger by the tail, but that's exactly what it is. It's like trying to hold a tiger by the tail, and eventually it can turn around on you in a second, right, if you're not careful. But there's not going to be this huge hardship that you might be thinking that would come of that. Because, again, of commercialization, they already have the technology for a cleaner, saner way of processing nuclear power. And I always get it confused. It's like, I think we're using fission today. It separates the atom, and that creates the power, but it also creates the nuclear waste. There's also a way of doing it the opposite way, which is called fusion, which the isotope of that is not nuclear waste, but clean drinking water. And it's safe, it's cool, but yet it powers the power plant. Now, the methodology of doing that, the only reason why we're not doing that today is because it's slightly more expensive than doing it the way that we're doing it today. But it's much more safer. It's a lot safer, it's a lot cleaner, and we wouldn't have the problems that we're having today with all the diseases that we're seeing because our immunity is being, drained because of, our bodies are having to combat all this pollution that's out there. Now, but that is only a substitution for where we're at today to in the not so distant future, but not right away. When Maitreya sees that humanity has put war in the rearview mirror forever, and we are truly a peaceful people, he will give the go-ahead for our space brothers on these other planets to start giving us the technology that they use, the technology of light. That's the energy and the way that they power their cities clean and efficiently, the way that they power their ships. It also is the way that they build things, the way that their medicine is based off of the technology of light. So, but in the wrong hands, it can be quite destructive. So they have to wait for us to be a peaceful people in order to give it to us. And I don't know how long that's going to be, but it's not going to be within the weeks of after people who know who Maitreya is. It's going to be years. But in the meantime, we have a clean, efficient way of doing things. By reversing the process of the nuclear power that we're using today, doing it the opposite way, as an interim. So, and then of course he'll start to address the greenhouse gases and the chopping down of trees, which is all coming from commercialization, which is, there's a lot to what you said, Abdullah. It's just not going to be, we're not going to be wiped out of it in the next 5 days. That's for sure. Hopefully, hopefully I'm right. All right. So the next comment comes from I see you. Do you see me? ? It says, unity is the goal. Everything happens for a reason, Gary. Everything is energy. Everything. Do you see me? Now, I do want to, bring in a bit of Maitreya's message that he gave through Benjamin Creme back in the 70s. At the end of a series of lectures that Benjamin Creme gave in the late 70s, early 80s, Maitreya overshadowed him and gave a message out to the audience, and it was recorded and so forth, and you can hear the recordings. But I do want to read a couple paragraphs about this, because I love your statement, okay? So I'm not being critical of what you said, but unity is not the goal, it's the truth, It's the way life really is now. Maitreya will be reminding us of that truth. According to the masters, every baby, when they're born, sees life the way they truly are. It's just we start to learn that the world is separate from us, which is the illusion, and there's always something that happens earlier on in our childhood that brings this about. It's a scale, of course. It's not a black and white, but coming from the masters who see nothing but unity to somebody who sees everything as totally about themselves or separate from themselves and so forth. There's always levels in between, right? It's all a spectrum. But he will remind us of that truth in everything that he says. But what I want to talk about is, and what I want to address with that is not only how he's going to teach us, but there's something in here I want to talk about. So hopefully you listen to this. It says, my masters will teach you the rules of life. I myself will show you that higher light which beckons mankind. My teaching is twofold. It has to do with man's physical nature, the necessities of life. It has to do also with man's relationship to that divine being whom we call God. In my vocabulary, these are as one, for only insofar as man correctly relates to man does he so relate to God. My plan is to show you this, to teach you that when man discovers in himself the ability to share, to love, to trust, from that moment begins his ascent to God. It was always so, and always shall be so. So, a lot of times people, when I talk about unity or oneness and so forth, they kind of bring in their 2 cents about what does it matter, or something like this, right? Well, what does it matter about the principle of sharing? If we're all one, what does it matter, right? I know Tao Zen Chi's brought it up several times, right? Well, according to Maitreya, those two are one and the same. So as far as man correctly relates to man, does he so relate to God? Jesus said something very similar to, I think it was Joseph of Arimathea or Nicodemus, one of those two, where he says, what's the greatest commandment? I think it was Joseph of Arimathea. He said, love thy God with all thy heart and all thy soul, put no other, gods above me, right? He said, that's true. But there's another commandment that's no less great. Love thy neighbor as thyself. And so you'll see a striking similarity between the teachings of Maitreya and of what Jesus talked about, because they're coming from the same source. Now, of course, my Christian brethren will totally disagree with me on that, but whatever. The teaching of the Christ has always been about humanity relating to humanity and then humanity relating to God as one and the same. And that's what Maitreya is talking about. But he's going to be talking about it in a very practical, everyday, modern way. And that is, the only way that starts is with the principle of sharing. This is what he just said in this. He said, when man discovers in himself the ability to share, to love, to trust, from that moment begins his ascent to God. So it is about us sharing, because you can't say that you put God above everything else and yet let your brothers and sisters die. You can't do that. And that's where I always have a disconnect, for lack of a better phrase or word, with people who are religious zealots, because they put God first and they totally ignore the needs of their brothers and sisters who are struggling or dying, from hunger or poverty or whatever. We have to look at it as one and the same. You also have to include the environment in there. You can't separate God from the environment. So when we're mistreating the environment, we're also mistreating God in a way. We're not relating to God correctly. So it's one and the same. That's what Maitreya is going to be talking about. Now, the last comment I want to talk about and address comes from Tao Zen Chi. Now, Tao, I really appreciate you not putting this in 30 different comments, but it is very difficult for me to kind of piece together what you're trying to say, because each sentence is kind of its own comment, and sometimes it's hard to kind of relate to it. So I'll do my best to kind of comment on this. Hopefully I do. It says, on TV, LOL, day, night, or of declaration, LOL, what channel, how arrange D via satellites, factual information happenings is how, see what I mean? Who, the United Nations, in fact, how, when, who, Maitreya, on which channel, Netflix Live. You see illogical. And then it says, people, the masses are not interested in another John Lennon-ish, right? I don't know. I like John Lennon. But anyway, first of all, the Day of Declaration of what he's talking about, this is the first time you've ever heard about this. The Day of Declaration is the day that Maitreya finally addresses humanity directly at one time. He also, at that time, will say his real name, Maitreya. I don't think, and I'm of the opinion based on what I've read about the Day of Declaration, he's not going to say he's the Christ or the Imam Mahdi, but he will probably say, more than likely, those are names that we call him, or that he's looked to, as, or something like that. But he doesn't want to be known as those names. He only wants to be known as the teacher. But Maitreya is on TV right now, speaking to humanity, portraying himself as an ordinary person. So he's using just whatever name he's using. Now, prior to the Day of Declaration, Tao and everybody, we will have a pretty good sense of who this person is. His face will be quite familiar on TV, much more familiar than it is today, probably. He will be speaking more directly to humanity about the problems and the needs of humanity and so forth, and speaking out against the injustices in the world and so forth, where a lot of us who know this information will already have started to recognize or have recognized him as Maitreya before he even says it. But to the point where people will even, some of our representatives in the media will even ask him, are you Maitreya? Are you the one awaited by the religion, all the religions or whatever? He won't confirm it nor deny it up until the point of the Day of Declaration. Now, where this comes into what your statement is, we as a humanity will demand our news media to allow him the opportunity to speak. We will actually be the ones that are forcing our media to do it, not the media themselves. It will be linked up very similar to way than, like, if there's a international crisis or something like this, or oftentimes even when the president of the United States speaks, you can click on CBS and hear what he's saying, or you can click over to ABC, NBC, CNN, Fox, or whatever, and they're all covering the same thing because they're all linked, right? Might be at a slightly different angle, but because they have different cameras, but for the most part, you're hearing the same information. Now, what's going to make this quite a unique event, and will be looked upon from our future generations, they'll look at that day as the day when humanity finally, after long decades, maybe even eons, of headed toward the cliff of destruction, that's going to be the day that we finally, after a long wait, turn around and turn away from the cliff. But Maitreya, when he's asked to speak, will go to the podium, and if you're watching him on TV, when you start to hear him speak, it will not be coming through your speakers. You'll be hearing his call to humanity inwardly, telepathically in your own head. So every adult person above the age of 12, 13, or 14, just depends on the person, but everyone above the age of 14 will hear his call, his vision for the humanity, but also his concerns about us continuing on the way that we're doing. We will see it from his perspective telepathically, but we will hear it in our own head, in our own language. So if you're living in the United States, but your mother tongue is Russian, you will hear it in Russian. You won't hear it in English. You'll hear it in whatever language is the most comfortable for you to understand in your own head. So, or whatever your mother tongue is. So if you're Japanese, you'll hear it in Japanese, Chinese, and so forth and so forth. So it just depends on what your most comfortable language is in your head, is what you'll hear it in. And he'll speak for about 15, 20, 30 minutes, whatever it happens to be. We will see from his perspective why sharing is so important, why justice is so important, and above all, why peace is absolutely a necessity. And without it, there will be no future. We'll see it from his perspective. So, according to Benjamin Creme's own master, there will be a lot of people who maybe were on the fence about what he was saying, or not quite sure, or didn't know what to make of it, or just heard him on TV and kind of got on with their day. From that moment on, they will be like, whoa, yes, this is important. Yes, this needs to be the top priority. Yes, we need to save the environment. And it will be such a swift change from the course of direction of where we're headed today after that day of declaration. So, but no, it's not going to be a Netflix article, series on, a series on Netflix, but I thought it was really funny, or Netflix Live, or whatever you put it. But, and no, it's not going to be John Lennon-ish. It's going to be something like we've never seen before and we'll never see again. And even if you're out camping in the woods and you miss the time that, or you don't believe anything of what he's saying, you'll hear it inwardly in your own head, in your own language, while you're out in the woods, not in front of a television. So everyone will experience it. It will be a global Pentecost. Of course, Maitreya will put forth to humanity, it's our problem. We have to solve it. Nobody's going to solve it for us. The masters can't solve it for us any better than the birds can solve it for us. It has to be humanity that changes the ways, because we're the ones creating the biggest problem. So hopefully that helps. Now, not long after the Day of Declaration, this kind of brings me to Benjamin Creme's master's article. This, of course, is the words and ideas coming from one of these masters. It's always better for you to read it yourself. And the only reason I'm doing this is because most people don't have access to Benjamin Creme's master's articles. You can, if you just go on Share International's website and look to try to find it, or you can possibly buy the book on Amazon if you want. But this isn't the next best thing, but it's probably down about 5 or 6 of the best things to when it comes to reading one of Benjamin Creme's master's articles. But it's better than nothing, I guess. But anyway, it's entitled The New Environment. When the masters begin their historic return to the everyday world, they will find much to do to enable them to function adequately in the new environment. As many know, telepathy is their normal mode of communication, but working with men, they will have to learn again the long-discarded human speech. Many of your elder brothers are already hard at work on problems of physical plane activity. In this way, a greater degree of trust and facility of work will be engendered. Furthermore, many masters have had little or no direct contact with humanity for centuries, and so will find the situation and mode of working altogether new. Of course, most masters are very adaptable and quick to learn, but inevitably, some will find the unfamiliar experience of working on the outer physical planes taxing indeed. For many years now, certain masters have trained a large group of disciples in the difficult work of implementing the plans, political and economic, of the new civilization. These trained men and women, chosen by democratic vote, will make concrete and real the plans of the more senior members of the hierarchy. Thus will the reconstruction of the world go forward smoothly as the people's needs are recognized and accepted. The task of reconstruction is vast, offering men a field of service like never before. Countless millions living in poverty and want must be the first to receive a crash program of aid on a scale never yet attempted. Gradually, our gigantic cities will give way to smaller ones with an abundance of gardens and parks. The ugly slums of today will be replaced by varied areas of stimulus and rest. One of the obvious differences will be the absence of pollution and smog. In town and country, fresh air will be truly fresh. Travel will be fast and silent, and the longest journeys short and pleasurable. Fatigue will disappear. Obviously, all of this will take time to implement, but step by step, the search for beauty will become the keynote of our existence. Free, unlimited energy owned by all and shared by all will guarantee this transformation. Thus will the new age be heralded, calling all men to give of their best in the service to the plan. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.